Welcome back to Screamacelica. Kevin Graham, it has become such a part of my life that even when I'm talking to Alan McGee about the album behind you, I accidentally slipped into Axon mode and called it Screamacelica live on stage in front of 200 or 300 Oasis fans. This is also our opportunity, Kevin, not only to do the old school thing by running the show, but to have a wee chat about that night with McGee, because this is the best show to talk about it on. So obviously we're going to be speaking about the fourth studio LP by Oasis. We both know, and everybody listening will know, that it was in actual fact the fifth album, because they released a B-sides compilation called The Master Plan that obviously was better than this effort, but we'll come to that later on. And at this point, they were no longer with Creation. So let's wrap up the Creation thing, because obviously we were with Mr. Alan McGee on Friday night last week. These things are still quite surreal to me, Kevin. Do you feel the same? You know, backstage, talking to Alan McGee, getting your photo taken with him, having a wee bit of a chin wag with the guy?
That's quite surreal. You're talking about a guy who was a major, major part of my musical learning. Creation is a legendary label. And the amount of bands, the amount of Creation records I've had over the years is absolutely frightening. The fact he was just a wee guy from Glasgow who is very self-deprecating, isn't he? I didn't really care what I was doing half the time. But you do get that impression where a lot of these guys like Tony Wilson and Alan McGee and that, they just seem to have a go. And it's people talk about punk rock being an attitude, being music. It's not music, it's an attitude.
It's a state of mind, isn't it?
It is. It's definitely, we can just do it ourselves. And you're talking about Alan. I mean, he's been pals with Bobby Gillespie since 1977, and that's for 1977. I mean, and that's all I say to him. I just says thank you for the Primal Scream. That's all I says to him when I was having when I had that wee 30 seconds with him. I didn't thank him for Oasis. I thanked him for the Primal Scream, because he believed in the Primal Scream. He took Bobby Gillespie to that field in Brighton to meet Andy Weatherall. When you even read Bobby Gillespie's book, Tenement Kid, he was ready to chuck it. But it's amazing. A guy that produced the Mary Chain, then the Scream, and he was just such a down-to-earth guy. And what I really enjoyed about the night, well, obviously Alan and his stories and that were great, was the amount of folk that came up to myself, Paul, and welcome back Screamacelica.
Yeah.
Says that they've been missing it, especially Daniel. I didn't get your second name, Daniel, so he asked me to say hi to you. So thank you, Daniel. He cornered me at the bar, and he says, "Hey, can you say hi to me? I love Screamacelica." And everybody was really, really pleased that we were back, and it was me and you.
Which was the original lineup, and it was our concept, Screamacelica, and we've been meaning to get back on it, Kev, but obviously, you know, life and all that kind of stuff, all the good stuff actually gets in the way, and we always intended on coming back and covering a whole host of albums. It's not just going to be Oasis, but we've kick-started it off because we were doing our gig with Alan McGee. We decided we'd already done the Definitely Maybe album, let's do the rest of this discography, and then we'll see where it takes us. And what actually happens is people then say, oh, by the way, can you cover this album? We've already had that this week. Someone has asked us to cover Going for Gold, which is the compilation, the greatest hits album of Shed 7. And by the way, they did have, because I mean, Shed 7 became one of the albums it was easy to just slag off. The music press seemed to slag them off. But by the way, you listen to their singles, Kev, and they stand up all these years later.
I was fortunate enough to see them at Belladrum last year when I had a set at Belladrum on the Saturday, and I clashed with Shed 7. So they were starting at 7:30.
Just on the set list, or just like fisticuffs? Because I didn't fancy Rick Witter as a bit of a boxer, you know. He seems like quite a relaxed, laid-back guy.
I thought when I went to Belladrum, I was getting backstage and I could maybe have a wee blather with him, but No, us numpties had a different area. We had a completely not different area for like Nile Rodgers and all of that. They had helicopter pads and all of that, and like.
But you were on a bill with Nile Rodgers, bottom line.
I was on a bill. Anyway, I rushed through my set and finished so we could go and watch Shed 7. I knocked 15 minutes off my set so we could go and watch Shed 7. And it's actually amazing for a band that I own no records of, how many songs I actually knew.
Yeah.
And they were good live. They were really good live. They
went on a really, prolific run of singles, didn't they? But I mean, I think Changegiver, and then what was the name of the big album after that? What was it now? The one with quite a few that hits, Getting Better and all that kind of stuff. It'll come to me. I don't want to check it if someone in the comment section wants to tell me. And that was around about the TFI Friday time and all that. One thing that interested me, Disco Down was on Going for Gold. Parallel Lines. Was it Parallel Lines?
Is that the name of it? Was it not?
Listen.
I can't help you, mate. I can't help you. As I say, I own no Shed 7 records whatsoever, but I know a lot of their songs.
Yes.
That's just the way it is, eh?
They were one of the bands around about this kind of Oasis time, 1990s, where the hits kept coming. But there had to be a come down. There had to be a come down from Britpop, from even Creation Records. Kevin, you said you wanted to pull me up about something on Friday night. What is it that you want to pull me up about?
What did Alan McGee say his favourite song on Be Here Now was?
Did he say it on the stage?
Yes.
Did he? Oh, now let me have a think, because what he said about that, do you know what I mean? Didn't he say it was, do you know what I mean?
I'm sure he says Magic
Pie.
Oh,
wait a minute. He said Magic Pie. He did. He said it was Magic Pie.
Did you not hear me shout for the audience?
I just thought it was a heckler. I thought it was it was a heckler. It just so happened to be you. Yeah, he did say that. He was a fan of Magic Pie, and I'm sitting thinking,
the man who brung us Ride, the Super Furry Animals, the Mary Chain, the Primal Scream agrees with me. Magic Pie is a fantastic song. So there you go.
I dropped it last week, and it's going to be interesting with this LP, right? So, because there's a few songs I could have dropped in it, but I think it's all down to structure. I think it's that there's two trios of songs on this album that work, and everything else doesn't really work. And I remember having the opinion on this album that, you know what, it would have made for an outstanding EP, or maybe even a couple of EPs, right? Maybe even a couple of EPs, like the old Beat a Band thing. And by the way, the Beat a Band's influences on this album, but maybe a couple of EPs, and you would have got two CDs with 4 songs and 4 tracks times 2.
Then you add in the B-sides.
Exactly.
And you would have had 2 cracking EPs.
Well, there you go. But what we've got is we've got a flawed album. Now, obviously, as you know, we went down to Salford and we filmed a live event with Brian Cannon of Microdot. Microdot did all the 1990s cover art for Oasis, The Verve, and various other bands. They worked with Super Furry Animals, Suede, who I know weren't a Creation band, the Beat a Band. They'd done the 3 EPs and various others. Brian Cannon had done it. And so I really am interested in the album art and the vibe that gives, and how it's the whole package, Kev, the music, the live, the attitude, the artwork, the whole thing. But you go into the 2000s, not only are they no longer on Creation Records, Oasis, they've changed their logo. Big bad mistake, if you ask me. This is the first LP not on Creation. There's a new logo. They're no longer working with Microdot for their artwork, which I think, again, was a bad move. This is the first album, Kev, without Gwigsy and Bonehead. The spirit of Oasis was never going to be the same again. Maybe the musicianship improved, Kevin, but I don't think the spirit was there. This is also the first LP that Owen Morris didn't produce. So you can see all the different changes. Things were changing. First album, not exclusively written by Noel Gallagher. So it was a completely different Oasis. And I'm going to ask you the question before we kick off here. And it was the first LP without Noel being on cocaine as well. Was it Oasis for you? Was this the real, true spirit of Oasis, this album?
As the song on the album says, where did it all go wrong? And it goes wrong with the logo change, it goes wrong with shitty covers, it goes wrong with poor artwork. It's an album which is basically recorded by Noel, Alan White and Liam.
Yep.
There's hardly any other guys on it. I think Game and Andy Bell didn't come in until after it was recorded, and they were basically looking for a band to go on tour. It's an album that should never have been made, really. He should have just sat on the good stuff with us and took it to Bell and Archer once he had actually got the band together, and it would have been a far, far better. This is like one of the wee gimps that you actually see who thinks of Liam Gallagher. It thinks it's Oasis, but it's no Oasis. Eh?
Right, I get that.
It smells like Oasis, but it's no. And I think Noel kind of knew that as well, be changing the logo and that. For me, this is the start of like the circus years, the parody years, where it's just basically, they could have just called it the Gallagher Brothers and a couple of session musicians. This is only carrying on the Oasis name just for weight, kudos, and...
Well, they're a massive brand at that stage, Kev.
They're a massive brand at that
This
stage.
is them. You're right.
I remember this album, and I remember John Sim, and I don't know why I remember his interview in the NME, bumming up this album, going, it's great, they've got samples, they've got, and I'm going, mate, it's like, they thought, right, what can we do that's very, very Beatles? This is the first one that tries to obviously ape the Beatles. They're going, we'll go a wee bit psychedelic. We'll go on a wee Casio keyboard and press the psychedelic function dance beat and see what we can come up with. And, I actually had to fall out with you this week because you made me listen to it again.
Well, I'm sorry for that, but I did revisit I revisited the B-sides, and I felt that was interesting because it showed me that up to this point, and obviously this probably culminated in the release of the master plan, I was obsessed with Oasis B-sides. You know what I mean? You could have probably have identified any Oasis B-side with the first 2 seconds of the track. And then I'm listening to these ones, Kevin, and they weren't as familiar to me as all the earlier B-sides that I know like the back of my hand. I'm
going to tell you the truth. The 5 B-sides which were on these 3 singles, I had never heard them.
Really?
That shows you maybe how disengaged I had became, and it was an utter pleasure listening to these 5 B-sides.
Do you prefer? Well, I get it, exactly, and this is the thing.
Like, wow.
One of the questions we ask at the end of these Screamacelica shows is if you could drop 2 songs and replace them with 2 of the B-sides from the era, from the time, Kevin, which would it be? And when it comes into that, I was struggling because I think there was 3 that would have been better than 3 tracks on the LP. This was released, Kev, on the 28th of February 2000, and we're not going to leave the Celtic chat to the end of the show. It was released in the same month that Inverness Cali Thistle beat Celtic in the Scottish Cup. Right, so it's a bad month at the races for guys like you and me who are Oasis fans, who are Celtic fans. You're getting standing on the shoulders of giants, and you're also getting the Inverness Cali Thistle. Which was worse for you, Cali Thistle or this album?
Cali Thistle. There's got to be at the time, because I tolerated this album at the time and tried to convince myself it had grown me. And the reason being, they chuck you a curveball, be let it out, which is one of the best songs in the Oasis canon right away. And you go, oh, wait a minute, this could be cracking. And then nothing really after comes with it. And I remember listening to it and going, maybe it'll grow on me. Went to see them at Murrayfield with Doves and Happy Mondays as well.
Yep.
And I can't believe I went to Murrayfield on the strength of this album. But obviously you were gone because it was them.
Yeah.
It wasn't on the strength of this album, but you can't that they were going to play the plasticine for this album, and they did.
Well, the thing, by that stage, it had been so hard to get tickets as well at various junctures to see Oasis that whenever they came to town or whenever they came to Scotland, you'd go and see them, Kev. It became one of the things. You just go every tour, you'd go to see them. And there's been a few bands I've followed with that attitude. Shed 7, I can't believe I forgot. The name of their second album was A Maximum High. I listened to that album to death. Aye, but there is a song on it called Parallel Lines, but you're right, that's the Blondie album, of course it is. And their debut album was Change and Giver, which again, one of the albums that, we might actually cover, but we're going to stick to Oasis at the moment. I think we're also going to go through the BDI because Kev's got some very interesting stuff to say about the BDI albums. Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, Liam Gallagher. We've been asked to do Shed 7. Get your suggestions in the comments, because if you ask for it, we'll do it, Kev. We'll get round to it. We'll do it. Red Scotland, Shed 7 were cool. They were actually cool, but the music press made out like they were very uncool. And they used Rick Whitter's name as rhyming slang for the toilet. Now, at this point, Bonehead, who I have met and interviewed, and the interview is on the channel, so get onto YouTube and subscribe to that channel. And Bonehead left of his own volition. He wasn't sacked or any of this kind of stuff, Kev. And of course, Quigsy left. And I remember the quote at the time. And at the time, as an Oasis fan, you wanted it to work. Like you say, you were prepared to give the album time. No Gallagher's coming out. You're thinking the band's falling to pieces here. 2 founder members are away. And the famous quote was talking about Bonehead leaving. It's hardly Paul McCartney leaving the Beatles. Now, knowing what we know now, it seems a bit mean-spirited for him to say that about Bonehead. Bonehead founded the band with Quigsy. Bonehead was in the band before Liam, never mind Noel.
Musician-wise, he's maybe got a point, but I think Bonehead's a far better musician than he was maybe given a lot of credit for. Mm-hmm. The powerfulness of the bar chords that he uses on the first 3 albums is part of the Oasis sound. That's just Noel doing a bit of Marquis Smith there, eh? That's just, I didn't worry about it. I'm the main man. I mean, what was Marquis Smith's famous quote? If it's your granny and me on bongos, it's still the fall. That was Marquis Smith's famous quote. And he says it a couple of times. Obviously, the fall went through about 57 musicians in a 30-year period. And a couple of times he says, the band just got too old, so I sacked them. And it's that kind of Manchester flippantness. No, it's not exactly Paul McCartney leaving the Beatles. I write all the songs anyway. So none of that's going to change. So I'm the talent. I'm the good guy. I've still got my brother who can sing these songs for me. Because I wouldn't be anywhere without my brother. Yeah,
and that's the thing. I think there was certainly in this album there were signs that he wasn't as much of a golden boy as we had put him on a pedestal at this stage. We never ever thought it was going to end. And Alan McGee said it, didn't he, on Friday night? They never thought the songs were going to stop coming. And had it been business over art, they would have held on to Acquiesce, they would have held on to the Master Plan, Rocking Chair, Talk Tonight. They'd have held on to all these amazing songs, and they would have made up a third album in the 90s, not a compilation album, but the band's third album. Where did they get the misinterpreted title for this album? Well, it came from I was going to say the side. It came from Around a £2 Coin, and it was a quote from Sir Isaac Newton. But the quote is standing, of course, on the shoulders of giants. But Noel Gallagher wrote it down incorrectly, and they ran with it anyway. And that is the album title, Standing on the Shoulder of Giants. We're revisiting it tonight, Kevin. Do you think it's going to get the 20th anniversary, 25th anniversary, 30th anniversary treatment that the classic 1990s Oasis albums got? Obviously not, because we've already gone 23 albums, and there wasn't a murmur at the time that we were looking at the 20th anniversary of this album. It's almost been disowned by Noel Gallagher, isn't it?
It has been, quite rightly so. There's so much wrong with this album. It's like some of it is so tedious and so bland and so unimaginative. For a guy who for the previous 8 years, 7 or 8 years, couldn't have done nothing wrong. To come out with this utterly dead, cold turkey, an album, it's like,
Kev,
it's actually quite frightening. It's like...
I'm looking forward to hearing if there was anything on this album that passed the Kevin Graham test, because obviously, famously now, you ripped What's the Story Morning Glory, and you behind. We then went into Be Here Now. There were certain moments of that you weren't fond of, but I think over the piece, I'm going to ask you this at the end of the show anyway. I don't know, you might rate Be Here Now over What's the Story Morning Glory. I don't know. I'm going to ask you to rank the first 4 in order. But let's get into the tunes. And if you're interested in Oasis, Screamacelica and Celtic, get involved in the comment section. Agree, disagree, give us some suggestions for new albums, and we'll cover them when Kevin and I can come together as we have done tonight. Now, I'm going to say it. Fucking in the Bushes, great start to this album, Kev, right? And it's also a brilliant intro to the live shows around about that time. As we know, it completely rips off Led Zeppelin, right? And I think it's unashamedly doing that, because wasn't shy of ripping off fellow musicians. We put this festival on you bastards with a lot of love, a whole lot of love, Led Zeppelin. And that was obviously a quote from the documentary on the Isle of Wight 1970. If you're a Leonard Cohen fan, there's a great box set which gives you an Isle of Wight DVD as well, and some of the quotes and all that are also in the Leonard Cohen LP. I think it's a great introduction to the album, Kev, and it's kind of promising that things are going to be done a wee bit differently, because as your man said, John Sim, there are samples in this. You know what the original samples were? Did you listen to the demos? No? No. So the original samples, thank God they changed them, were from the Austin Powers movie. So they've changed them, and they're much, much better now. So as an intro, as a track 1 on the album, it does a job. I think it's good. It passes the test. It's a good start.
It passes the test, but it just feels a bit throwaway. I mean, you look at Do You Know What I Mean and Rock and Roll Star, then you've got, as we've already decided that we hate Hello. No, we've already decided that. That was another lemon, an opening song. And this one, it just seems like a sort of, I don't know, as you say, they're trying to show a new direction by sticking you back to a 1970 rock festival. Going, we're going in a different direction. Oh, here's some samples. Here's some samples for a 1970 rock festival, and we'll do like a bit of Led Zeppelin in it as well, and we'll have a bit of rock and guitar and a bit of sampling and a bit of a drum machine and stuff like that as well. As you say, it's a great intro tape. It is a great intro tape. I've never really thought of it as a song.
What did the Roses often came on to Don't Stop, didn't they? They would have a DJ like Dave Haslam, obviously, who we've worked with, would DJ for them, someone like that. But they would actually, wait a minute, there's a track at Spike Island, and it's
DJ
do it now. But I'm pretty sure Don't Stop was definitely used. And yeah, you're right. It's one of the ones where, you know what, right, Kev, here you go. Had it not been on this album, we'd be sitting here now, 23 years later, having heard it live as an intro tape, right? Because it was obviously, and we'd be going, why on earth was it not on the album? We would,
but then it doesn't really go anywhere, does it?
No, but I think it does merge pretty seamlessly into Go Let It Out. I think it's a good, honestly, the first 3 tracks on this album for me work really well. I'm actually sitting as an Oasis fan 23 years ago. I'm thinking to myself, right, this is going to be a better album than Be Here Now. We're back. Oasis are back. And then it goes a wee bit ski whiff. So I don't know, is it mixed then? Because I'm happy with Fucking in the Bushes. I don't mean that literally, but I'm happy with the tune. What about yourself? You're not so sure, are you?
I'm not too sure. I didn't count it as a song, really. I've never actually thought of it as a song. It's like the start of the Second Coming with the Stone Roses. It's just a filler before Go Let It Out.
That's worth waiting for, though, that 4.5 minutes.
It is. The bass line kicks in, which is utterly fantastic. And with this one, I just think this is like a sort of...
I never thought about it like that.
Before you get to the absolute majestic brilliance, which is Go Let It Out. And
so when you're listening to the album, Do you skip this then? Do you skip track?
I always do. I always
you?
go to. Aye.
Right.
I listen to it. And also as well, because it's still very familiar, because I've seen it so many times, because I've heard it so many times in different settings. Liam live, Oasis live a couple of times as well, eh? So I know it, eh? And I ken it's like sort of.
We've got the first disagreement of the night. We've got the first disagreement of the night because I'm all over it. I think it's a perfect intro. Right, but I'm going to ask before we go into track 2, right? You mentioned the Roses, right? So let's look at the eponymous debut album, right? That absolute nugget. It's blissfully good, the Stone Roses 1989 album, right? So if you're looking at that, what do you think of Don't Stop and Elizabeth, My Dear? Do you think they're pivotal to the LP? Or do you think, oh, you know what? The Roses could have put Where Angels Play or Standing Here or Going Down. What's your take? Is it all about putting in the best songs? Or sometimes is it good to have these wee interludes that just give a structure to the LP?
There's never once have I listened to the Stone Roses debut album When Angels Play should be on this.
No.
No, there's never once that I've listened to that album.
But you accept it's a beautiful tune, though.
Where Angels Play?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, some bands have had sold millions and millions and millions of records and never written as anything as good as Where Angels Play. Or
this is sacrilege. Paradise. This is sacrilege. But once we get to the Roses album, we'll be asking, what 2 tracks do you drop for 2 B-sides? And this is where I'm going with it.
I'll leave that for that. That is controversial. It's controversial. Elizabeth, My Dear, as well. We could talk about the Roses all night, but Elizabeth, My Dear, as well. It suits that point in the album.
I know it's good like for the structure.
It's like it does suit that point in the album, and like the wee gunshot at the end is quite, or the cough, as he says it was.
Aye. No. Pivotal to their political beliefs at the time and to this day. Go Let It Out comes on, and it's Beta Band, Kev. It's the Beta Band intro, and you know you've got the video, like you say. Game never played on the LP, but he's in that video. Andy Bell's not in that video, and you're looking at Liam. You're thinking, he's looking the part. Is Liam, you know that Noel has been given all the interviews around about that time about getting clean and coming off of the cocaine and all this kind of stuff. And like you say, if you were to look at every single that Oasis released, this is up there. It's brilliant. It's a superb song. It's a tremendous second track on this album. It rips off a great band in the Beta Band. I don't know if Noel was a fan. I can't remember Noel ever speaking about them.
He did admit that he was a fan of the Beta Band.
Right. Well, that makes sense. And of course, it gets to number 1, which had become the norm for Oasis singles. But this and all albums after this, it was only normal for the comeback single to get to number 1, Kev, because things were completely changing in the musical landscape. But Oasis by this stage had a creation supergroup. They had brought in Game from Heavy Stereo, which were financially one of the worst bands that were ever on Creation. They lost Creation a lot of money. And Andy Bell, who, as you know, came in from Ride. So talk me through the song. Why do you love it so much?
Was he No and Hurricane #1 as well, who were a Creation band?
Yeah, Andy was in Gay Dad.
Was it?
Andy Bell was also in Gay. Yes, there you go. But yeah, Hurricane #1. They were doing so well.
They were doing so well.
I know. And then they sold their soul to the sun. Remember? Only the strongest will survive. They gave the sun that. And then never the same after that. So talk us through this. This is one of your favourites.
It is one of the favourites, and it's mainly to do with the psychedelic Beta Band influence. We're heavily into the Beta Band in the State of Mind studios, and they're the only band I really want to reform now.
Remember Suey done the Beta Band at the toll booth. I still listen to that. Brilliant. Loved it.
I loved the Beta Band, and this was just psychedelic Beta Band with Noel giving it his classic pop sensibilities to get it to #1. Something that maybe, even though I think Steve Mason is a genius, the guy, the writer of the songs of the Beta Band and I saw the Beta Band numerous times as well, but this was basically a generational songwriter taking a formula that I loved and taking it to the top of the charts. and everything looked so brilliant when you heard this. You're like, wow, that is a step in another direction. That doesn't sound like anything that they've ever done, like before or even since. I don't think they've ever touched that sort of accidental psychedelia since. There are a couple of times where they've tried to go psychedelic and completely balls it up. But this one was a perfect garage pop 60s psychedelic record.
Garage, I like that. Aye, definitely, because of course the whole Creation vibe, they were named after a 60s garage band called The Creation. And Alan McGee was also in a band called Biff Bang Pow, which was a song title of The Creation. And I'm looking at the B-sides earlier on today. Through the album, like you say, there's some real quality in the B-side. So again, it's a reminder that Noel still had it. I don't think they were quite up to the same kind of standard as before, but how on earth could they be? And when you look at the B-sides here, it's Let's All Make Believe and As Long As They've Got Cigarettes in Hell. And Let's All Make Believe ended up as a bonus track on the Japanese edition of this LP, and it probably should have made it onto the LP as well. Decent song.
It should have made it onto the LP and should have Cigarettes in Hell. Made it onto the LP. Cigarettes in Hell and Let's All Make Believe drop bars of gold on a great height on a lot of the stuff that ended up on this album. And it was almost, I think it's all, when I heard these B-sides for the first time today, and I'm going like that, this could have been a perfect Noel Gallagher solo album. And maybe that's what he didn't want. And some of the stuff's been, what do they call it, lost gems, like lost genius B-sides. And I think it's maybe to do with, maybe because he wasn't on the old Colombian marching powder. He was like, I need to actually let go of being the chief. But he should have actually pulled rank here and made this a solo album.
I think one of the biggest errors that he made, and by the way, not on this album, certainly, because Little James is one of the worst things ever committed to records, not just by Oasis, but in the history of music. But I think that was the biggest mistake he made, was allowing others to write for Oasis. He should have just stuck to what he was doing. There was enough material here, Kev, because all the B-sides were written by Noel Gallagher. There was enough material for either a decent album or two decent EPs. But when you start looking through the discography from this point onwards, it was never as strong. Every single album's had patches in the albums that you thought, you know what I mean? You could have had a Noel Gallagher song in there and it would have been better. Apparently, and we'll get to this on the final album, there was a few tracks that were meant to be sang by Liam and he never turned up for the session. I don't know if you knew that story. And when you listen back to them, you're thinking, wow, the album would have been elevated. But yeah, I think so far, so good. First two tracks, you're thinking to yourself, yes, this is a decent Oasis album. And this is a song, track number 3, that I think divides opinion a wee bit. I'm on the side of it being an absolutely superb Oasis song. My favourite track on the album. I'm now talking about Who Feels Love. Right now, I think the video has got a proper Fool's Gold vibe to it, even though Liam's wearing a shocker of a red leather jacket that probably most of these acolytes would go and buy a copy from Matalan, Kev, because I did see a few people bouncing about with their red leather jackets on. But Andy Bell makes an appearance. It's got the Stone Roses vibe, but it's also got that Indian Beatles vibe that you mentioned earlier. And I honestly, when I speak to Oasis fans, this song barely gets a mention. Why?
Because it's shite. Why?
I knew for the minute I started talking about that song, you didn't like it. I knew it.
My face gives it away.
You can't help it.
No, remember in the 1980s when you got a wee Casio keyboard for your Christmas and you thought that you could be in the Pet Shop Boys or something like that, right? And the wee Casio keyboard had the preset.
I wanted to be an Adam and the Ants, mate.
Did you? The two drummers, Adam and the Ants.
Two drummers, aye. white stripe across my nose and all that.
Prince
I
Charming,
never, ever wanted to be in the Pet Shop Boys, and I don't know what that says about you in terms of your own psychological state at that point in your life. Adam and the Ants.
Wasn't Introspective by the Pet Shop Boys? What an album. An absolute fantastic album. Anyway.
So you wanted to be in the Pet Shop Boys?
I just stand there and press a button. It's like very like. I mean, my perfect world just now would be the guy who just stands behind the keyboards and like Sleaford Mods.
Oh yeah,
and just stands there and goes.
You need to grow a beard though.
That would be.
Didn't the Pet Shop Boys do a track with Dusty Springfield?
Yes, they covered. I did. I can't remember what it is, but
they definitely did.
Anyway,
we are disagreeing. We are disagreeing here.
Get your Casio keyboard, and it's got a wee preset, and it has Indian Beatles, Left Hour Rizzlers by George Harrison, and you press that. When you press that button, you get Who Feels Love. It's just so obvious.
That's harsh, mate.
Rubbish and completely lazy.
I totally disagree. I totally disagree with that. I think, sometimes if you press the preset, you get a Gorillaz song. You seen that video with Damon Albarn? You seen that?
Yes.
Have you? So basically, it's a preset. It's a demo. And that became a massive hit. No, I totally disagree. I think Who Feels Love's a cracking tune. Still love it. I was listening to it earlier, watching the video. Andy Bell's debut appearance in an Oasis video. And you look at the B-sides here. Now, I do like an Oasis cover. I like a bit of Come On, Feel the Noise. I loved Heroes. I thought that was brilliant. Street Fighting Man, even. And Helter Skelter's a song that I really do like. I really do. Because I remember reading a fantastic book called Helter Skelter that was all about Charlie Manson, around about the White Album and the Manson murders and all the rest of it. And you listen to the song and you know the relevance to that particular crime or spate of crimes. And then you hear the U2 version when, they were in the height of the Edge wearing like a leather waistcoat and stuff like that, with nothing underneath it. So they weren't very cool, but they covered the Helter Skelter. This is my least favourite version of Helter Skelter, and it's by one of my favourite bands, Oasis. Not a fan.
It's a difficult song to cover because it's been covered that many times, but again, I think it just lacks Liam. I think it just lacks Liam.
I think this album, Kev, one of the biggest problems about this album is it's Liam's worst Oasis album. It's Liam's worst moment in Oasis, this whole album.
I mean, listen to Familiar Millions, the live album that was recorded on this tour. It's utterly 10 pale for rubbish, man. Absolutely, like, Bluter Liam staggering about Wembley Stadium.
Frontman of a generation, I know.
Shouting at folk. No, it's no...
It's not good. And no making sense either. However, I've got to say the other B-side on the single, Kev, I still can't believe that you've written this off as George Harrison Rizzler. But Paul Weller covered the song.
George Harrison Rizzler.
I left over. Terrible. Paul Weller covered One Way Road on Studio 150. Have you heard his version of it?
No. As I say, I've only heard One Way Road.
Seek it out. It's a cracking song. And obviously the way that Weller does it, he puts a completely different twist on it. But it's a great B-side. And it's a great single, if you ask me. But you completely disagree. But it's at this point, for me, you've got Fucking in the Bushes, you've got Go Let It Out, and then you've got Who Feels Love. And I think that's the three. That's the trio I was talking about earlier, Kev. Then I think it goes wrong. The album goes wrong at this point with track number 4. Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is. Absolutely rotten. Terrible. Didn't make it to the end of the song. Plods along. It's just garbage. Terrible song.
It's got an interesting first 10, 15 seconds with the wee electronic bit, kind of the Who-ish won't get fooled again kind of vibe. Then it comes into like a splodge of plasticine.
Where's the quality control though, Kev? Where's the quality? At one point in the studio, somebody should be saying, "We're Oasis." That is nowhere near. That's like the kind of stuff you would hear on a Thursday night, band night, in any village, in any town. Just garbage.
Aye, it is utter rubbish. It's like somebody, I'll go back to my wee preset Castle. It's like somebody says, right, Oasis, there's a wee preset, and it's came out with that. It's farted that out with the batteries running it.
It's terrible. Can you remember No Oasis?
Yes.
And they tried that. They got a record deal for Sony. Did you? I don't know if you remember how bizarre things got back then. They got a 3-album deal, so they started writing their own songs. And what was the single that they released? They ended up on Top of the Pops like 3 times. I'd like to teach the world to sing, because obviously it sounded like Shaker Maker. Aye, and then they had B-sides, Kev. They had B-sides, and that was their own songs. And it was as painful listening to them as this was listening to Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is earlier on. I'm sorry, it was dreadful. Any Oasis fans out there who disagree, please tell us why you think it's a good song. I'd love to know, other than the wee bit that Kev mentioned there, the wee won't get fooled again, but it's just, it's devoid of anything, right? Have we actually agreed on something tonight then, Kev, aye?
Aye, we've agreed on something.
We're doing all right, 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4, well, 2 out of 4 ain't bad. Sending short greetings from Costa del Brum. You ever been in Birmingham, Kev?
Pre-season friendly.
1-0?
I can't remember. I just remember we were like...
I think it was Van Hooijdonk, 1-0. Sure it was.
The pub that we were in got bricked for the National Front.
Did it?
Aye.
Deary me. Red Scotland, timing at its best, just turned on, and there you both were with my old favourite acts on show, Screamacelica. Brilliant, Paul and Kevin, thank you. Yeah, as I said the other night, I'm asking Alan, because I'm all about the prep, Kev, you know that, if I do a gig, it's like weeks and weeks of preparation, and I'm asking him about one of the biggest albums he's ever been involved in. 1991, they released 3 albums creation. They released Loveless by My Bloody Valentine, Bandwagon-esque by Teenage Fan Club, and Screamadelica by Primal Scream. And when I get to that third one, I call it Screamacelica, and I'm looking out in the crowd to see if you're there laughing at me, and you were. A wee Freudian slip there. Couldn't help it. But yeah, Screamacelica is back. And we thought Oasis were back. And then I'm thinking by track 4, right, it's a blip. It's just a little blip in the matrix. We're back. Oasis are back. Track 5's going to be better, right? It's going to be much better. We're going to get back on track here. And then they give us Little James. And I don't like swearing on this show, but this song would drive you to it. It should, as I said before, it should never have made it onto record. They should have just looked at Liam and said, mate, this is not even a song. This is a nursery rhyme. You can sing this to your boy at night time, but we're not going to put it on an Oasis record, right? He was with Patsy Kensit at the time. Patsy Kensit's son was Little James, and the father of that boy was Jim Kerr, still is. Mm-hmm. And Liam wrote a song about the wee boy. So I love the sentiment. I love that. When you're tucking your wee boy in at night, Kev, you sing them a wee nursery rhyme, right? I love all that. Then he put it on an Oasis record, mate. Terrible. Almost unforgivable, Kev. Come on. Give me your take.
It's like your pubic hair getting pulled out with tweezers. Listening to this.
I'll take your word for that.
It is dreadful. Utterly dreadful. And it's one of those things that, like, folk have been cancelled for less.
I'm going to ask you again, what was worse? What was worse, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants or Inverness Cali Thistle? Have you changed your mind yet, now that we've got to track 5?
Look, it was still Cali Thistle, man. It was still Cali Thistle.
Just.
It's becoming just. Everything's gone wrong at this point. You've got Cali Thistle. This album comes out. It's an absolute turkey. We then move on to Kenny Dalglish playing 6 centre halves in a semi-final against Kilmarnock, where we won none.
Doing his press conferences for the Beards.
Beards bar. This is
a strange time, Kev. It was a strange time to be us.
It's like the worst acid trip ever.
Mm-hmm. Like that one you told me about with Ian McCulloch doing it at Anfield.
That's only a story. None of that ever happened.
I think it did. Little James, for me, after I heard this song, Kev, I probably did vow at the time, I never want to hear another Liam Penn song ever again. And we know that some of the early tracks that Oasis wrote after changing their name from The Rain were co-written by Liam Gallagher and Bonehead. And I think they've maybe surfaced somewhere along the line. And I remember, you know, when Oasis were at their absolute height and used to get like no bootlegs, but you would get unofficial annuals at Christmas time, and you would get like big poster specials and the newsagent and all that kind of stuff. I remember buying one of them, and Liam was talking about some of the songs he had written. Now, this is at the height of Oasis, and the titles and all this. And at that point, you're thinking, oh, I wonder what they sounded like. And now I'm just glad I never heard them, because I was hoping that Oasis would last forever for nothing else than to ensure that Liam never ever released a solo album after listening to Little James. It was absolutely done. Terrible. I don't think it was ever done live. And I've given up on the album at this point. We're 5 songs in, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, you gave me 3 brilliant tracks. You disagree, you think there was one. And then 2 absolute shockers. You're going to have to do something special to pull this back now. No. Was Gas Panic good enough to pull you back in?
I think because of the turgid nonsense before Gas Panic, even today, if you hear Gas Panic itself, you're like, aye, that's all right, that's fine. When you hear it after Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is in Little James, it sounds like a bloody Eurovision song winner. It sounds absolutely fantastic. After those,
I heard
those two
Eurovision
songs.
song winners fantastic though.
Oh, they've got a certain like style and a certain like goodness about them.
What was the Beatles song that they wrote, and it was meant to be for the Eurovision Song Contest, and it became?
Don't know anything about that.
Yeah. It became a massive Beatles song. It obviously never ever made it to the Eurovision, but it was written with that in mind. And I remember Noel Gallagher getting interviewed, I don't know if it was tongue-in-cheek, saying that he would love to write a song for Eurovision.
He says All Around the World should have been it. He wanted to be all around. He wanted
All
to be
You Need Is Love. All You Need Is Love. That was a Beatles song, mate. Yeah.
I didn't remember that. Making Your Mind Up with Bucks Fizz, a cracking wee song.
Right, so
won the Eurovision.
Have you lost? I've seen them live. I've seen Bucks Fizz live at the ballroom in Dunfermline, and they done that thing where they pulled the glittery skirts off. Remember?
Oh, I was going to ask that, man.
They'd replaced, what was her name? Cheryl something. They'd replaced the 2 females in the band with like 2 20-year-old dancers. And it was the 2 original guys. It was all a bit sad and sinister in the ballroom that night. Gas Panic, I said last week, and I'm going to take it back. I said last week, right, that there were 2 songs, Kev, on Be Here Now and Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, that everybody, Oasis fans, seemed to like really like, and I didn't. And remember, we spoke about Fading Out. And the other one, I think I mentioned it last week. I mentioned Gas Panic. I listened to Gas Panic today, and I realised I was talking absolute nonsense. This is a decent song, mate. I think Gas Panic's a decent song.
It is a decent song. In the context of this album, it's like a fantastic song in the context of this album. And I can maybe see how it's still fondly remembered by Oasis fans at this time. Has Liam done it and he's Oasis okay? Has he done Gas Panic?
Oasis okay. I'm not sure. Maybe someone in the comment section will be able to clarify, because there is a song on this LP that he has done and done it better, if you ask me, but we'll come to that. This is the moment.
I think as well, the version of Gas Panic I really like it's been on Sky numerous times. The Barrowlands did the 10 Years of Noise and Confusion tour. They done Gas Panic that night, and it was utterly mesmerising. It was really, really good that night.
The 10 Years of Noise and Confusion. So Noise and Confusion was a lyric from, The World of Twist. The World of Twist, whose debut album was called Quality Street, believe it or not. And they covered Sons of the Stage. Yes. And Noise and Confusion. I think at some point, one of the early albums, Oasis albums, were going to be called Noise and Confusion, because Noel was a big fan. And when you used to go into the Pretty Green shops, the vinyl, World of Twist Quality Street vinyl, was in the shop. So there you go, another wee bit of, another fun fact for you there. So I'm thinking at this point, Kevin, that they're back on track with this album with Gas Panic. I thought the first 3 tracks were great. And then 4 and 5 were terrible. Gas Panic gets you back on track. And then Where Did It All Go Wrong comes in. And I'm going to be interested because I never can tell if you're going to be up for a song or not, because on the one hand, you think Wonderwall's rotten, and then you think Fading Out's good. And it's difficult for me to figure you out. So Where Did It All Go Wrong? Is that continuing in the vein of getting this album back on track? Do you like the song?
I like the song, aye. I really do. I really do like the song. It's got a kind of Paul Weller-ish vibe, eh? It's got the chorus, I think, could be Paul Weller. Aye, again, it's a really, really good no-pen song. And when you look at the B-sides in that as well, as I say, this could have been a great no-soul album. It really could have been a great no-soul album. I like Where Did It All Go? I like this trio of songs. I think this trio of songs, like Save It. And if I was ever having to go back to listen to it, I would go Let It Out. Then I would skip right to Gas Panic and listen to Ray Free and listen to Gas Panic, Where Did It All Go Wrong, and Sunday Morning Call. And that would be it.
Would you not even listen to Who Feels Love? No.
No, definitely
not. The best lyric on the album is on this song, but we'll come to that at the end of the show because we talk about picking a lyric out. I don't know if you've done that yet, Kev, because I put you on the spot last week. But for me, the best lyric of the album is on this particular song. I agree with you, and I think that Noel did a few dates, didn't he? After the world tour of Standing on the Shoulder of Giants, where it was just an acoustic Noel, and there was all these rumours around him maybe doing the solo thing and all that. And in his set was Where Did It All Go Wrong, and it sounded magnificent as an acoustic, just him sitting on a stool with his acoustic guitar. It sounded brilliant, Kev. It really did. So I agree with you. Yeah, we're back on a trio of songs. This is the second trio of the album, if you ask me. Kevin disagrees. And then the third of that was Sunday Morning Call, which was, of course, released as a single. Cracking video. Don't know if you watched it back. Very good video. All three videos were brilliant, actually, for this album.
I can't remember the video for Sunday Morning Call.
It's based on the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You've got a guy sitting in like an apartment, and you'll recognise him because I'm pretty sure he played Ewan McGregor on one of the theatrical adaptations of Trainspotting. I'm sure he did. And Noel Gallagher's. When you would go into a corner shop and they had the kind of beads, it was a curtain of beads, and it would lead you into the storeroom. I used to hear one of them actually in my shop.
Still game.
Aye, one of they ones, aye. And Noel standing behind that, playing his guitar, almost like a spectre in the background. It's a good video.
I do remember it. No, you actually says that. I actually do remember it.
Aye.
Sunday Morning Call. Brilliant song. Absolutely brilliant song. I just love the whole sentiment of it. That's the kind of texture it's absolutely fantastic. It doesn't plod, it doesn't go too fast. It's just got this sort of maybe you ever heard James doing a cover version of Sunday Morning by the Velvet Underground?
I haven't. I love that song, but I've never heard that version.
This song reminds me of that James cover version. It's got that same sort of light airiness, but the lyric is really, really dark, eh? And it's a great song. Again, it's one of them that I don't think gets the credit it deserves. No. And I don't think they've even done it live. I don't think Noel's maybe even done it in a solo tour or anything like that. Good point. If he's going to play Little by Little, he should actually play Sunday Morning Call, for God's sake.
Yeah, we'll get to Little by Little in a couple of albums' times. But the thing again that I said earlier, Kev, this is Liam's worst Oasis album. The two tracks that you reckon are part of a trio that saves it, Where Did It All Go Wrong, Sunday Morning Call, both Noel-sung tracks. Liam's nowhere near them. And I think that's quite interesting. Again, it was a single. It was released, didn't get to number one. But the B-sides, Carry Us All and Full On. Now, you said that the B-sides were all great. I'm going to disagree on Full On. No fan of Full On.
I can get, the melody line is all around the world. It is all around the world. When he sings that first line in Full On, it has got the same peaks and troughs and number of syllables as All Around the World. But when you put Full On in the context of this album, it's better than Little James. It's better than Put the Money Where Your Mouth Is. So that's how I would put it on the album, but I can get where you're coming from. Out of the 5 B-sides, it's probably the weakest one. And I'm not counting Helter Skelter as a B-side. Out of the 5 B-sides, it is the weakest one, but it would definitely improve this album.
Yeah.
If Liam sung it.
Well, I'll need to ask you what it's going to replace, and hopefully you don't say Who Feels Love, because that would be a really bad end to this particular Screamacelica episode. Des Adary, can you name the guy on his avatar?
It's Bob Keller, Carol G's.
It is. And you know this, Kev, right? You think about how, when you think back to how innocent your childhood was at times with Saturday night TV, you've got a guy with a Mauser with a puppet of a dog called Spit, and it was hilarious. It wasn't hilarious, but you know what I mean? That was hilarity at its finest on a Saturday evening. Des, thank you for bringing that back into the equation. And had Cooler Shaker K on last night, Timeless album. Cooler Shaker K, Kev?
Let me at that.
Do you want to cover it?
I'll cover that.
Yeah. What's the great song on that? Not one of the singles. Start All Over. Brilliant We Love song on that album. I wouldn't mind covering that, actually. Tatva, Govinda, all that stuff, yeah? You up for it?
I'm up for that, right?
But I don't know if you're saying that because you want to rip it to pieces or if you actually enjoy it.
You just need to find it.
I'll need to wait and see. Yeah, Des Adary, again, whole album sounds like a come down. Yeah, totally get that. And even when you look at the kind of lyrical aspect of Where Did It All Go Wrong in Sunday Morning Call, it does sound like a come down. We then go to another song, which I'm going to have to put in the same category, Kev, as Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is. And the song is called I Can See a Liar. Oh. And I think it is just, same old Oasis dirge. Somebody trying to sound like Oasis, but without any kind of songwriting or song playing ability. That's what it sounds like to me.
Again, it's like they've went into the studio and this album needs a song that sounds like Oasis. Oh, right, okay, this one. And it just sounds like somebody farting down a toilet tube.
It's Oasis by numbers, but there's no melody. There's no the Oasis magic. There's none of the Wally sound that you used to get. They've obviously changed the producer. You don't have Bonehead on the rhythm guitar, and you're listening to the album thinking it's lost its soul a wee bit here, Kev. There's, it's no Oasis anymore. Right, final song on this album, Roll It Over. I remember listening to this LP. By the way, only 10 songs on the album, shortest album the Oasis had released at this point. And I remember thinking, there's potential in that song, but it's unfinished. It sounded unfinished to me, Kev, at the time. So I couldn't fully enjoy it. So when we get to song 10, right, there's 2 lots of 3 songs on this album that I like, as you know, the opening 3, and then the 3 that we both agreed on, Gas Panic, Where Did It All Go Wrong, Sunday Morning Call. Then you get I Can See a Liar. I think, oh, that's rubbish. That's filler. And then Roll It Over, I'm on the fence because I think there's a song in it, but they don't capture it on the album. However, Liam has since done it live, and it sounds epic. He's nailed it.
The version that Liam done at Nebworth, I think it was, what would have been Nebworth, is far, far better than this version on the album. The version on that on this album sounds like Tracing Paper, Pink Floyd. It's like one of the bands that you see in a miner's welfare trying to be Pink Floyd. And there's a bit when the guitar solo comes in, and Noel presses his guitar board, and it's got Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and there's this big epic guitar solo. As you say, it just lacks any sort of depth. It's very, very shallow. Would I love to hear Lone Morris do it? But as you say, when Liam's got a hold of it recently, it's the song that it should have been.
Yeah.
It's badly recorded. But again, you're probably finding it's Noel or Alan White has basically played all the instruments on this, on Roll It Over, and it's badly produced. I can see why it ended the album. I can see why they thought it was going to be a decent end to the album, but it just falls flat, man. It really does.
It's flat, but the potential's there, and this is the frustration. So you're looking at the 10 tracks, Kev, You've enjoyed the B-sides. I'm thinking it's an album with 6 strong songs in it, 6 really good songs in it, and one that I'm on the fence about. And as I say, it could have been 2 EPs. It should have been 2 EPs, but it wasn't. And for me, it is the worst Oasis album ever released. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, if you were to rank the first 4, because we've covered the first 4 albums now, rank them from 4 to 1.
Definitely, maybe Be Here Now, Morning Glory, and this one's bottom of the pile by a massive distance.
Listen, it is for me as well. The only difference I would make, and if you listen to the shows, this probably came across, I've got the albums in chronological order in terms of how much I enjoy them. So it's definitely maybe Morning Glory, Be Here Now, and then Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. So as an Oasis fan, it's getting worse for me. But the first 3 were, for me, I loved them. I loved the first 3 albums. Didn't enjoy this so much. I enjoyed going back to it, though, to see if the revision or the retrospective would be any different. And you've got to also think about, at this time, Kev, what else was happening? Because people mentioned that during the week there. Oasis weren't pushing the envelope. They weren't pushing boundaries. You've got bands like Lamb Chop releasing Nixon, Grandaddy, The Software Slump. You've got Radiohead with Kid A, Primal Scream with Exterminator, Badly Drawn Boy, who's playing tonight in Glasgow with Hour of Bewilderbeast, Doves, Lost Soul, Super Furry Animals, Ming. You've got people who are actually pushing boundaries here. And then you've got Oasis coming away with this. So I think also if you listen to it with its contemporaries, it does not stand up well. Didn't even get into the top 50 in the NME end of year chart.
You listen to the Primal Scream. For me, the Primal Scream have made 2 seminal albums. They've made Screamacelica and Exterminator. And no many bands have made 2 albums that are, when you listen to them, you go, that was the best album of that year. And as you say, when you listen to Be Here Now with us, no Be Here Now, when you listen to Giants with us, and alongside even Dove's Lost Souls and Exterminator, this is just a pile of nonsense. It's an album that should never have been made. He should have sat on it until he had a band. Really, he should have just sat on it until he had a band, and basically he should have probably chucked it at this point and went solo. Because I think Liam's losing it at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. With hindsight. Remember, we were talking to Miggy on Friday night. I just wanted to get that in there. Just a big, massive name drop before we wrap up for tonight. Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about at that point when Creation decided that, well, when Alan McGee decided to wrap it up, they had at that point what he called like the big 4. They still had the big 4 bands. They had Oasis, Primal Scream, Super Furry Animals, and Teenage Fan Club at that point. And you look at what those bands were kind of doing in or around that stage, because Howdy came out in 2000 as well, Kev. That's an album I'm still listening to this day. I think it's a phenomenal album. But it didn't get the backing of the marketing that they would have got had Creation, still been operating, if you like. So they cut down all the staff so that they could release albums like Howdy and Exterminator and stuff like that. Oasis go along, set up Big Brother Records. They don't have the infrastructure that they had at Creation. So, that might play a part as well, Kev. Everything's changed and they're out there on their own, if you like. And they've produced this.
It's still Sony the way, so they've still got a bit of clout in the musical game, eh?
Yeah, but who's there to say to them, no, this isn't strong enough? Who's there to say that? That's the problem, eh? Yeah. And, would McGee have done it? Because he admitted he probably should have done it with Be Here Now. But I don't trust everything McGee says because he liked Magic Pie. So, you've got to take that into account as well. Right, we've already ranked them.
What you've got to also think about as well, I mean, if you go, that was February, so you get to the August, the day before we beat Rangers 6-2, Martin O'Neill's arrived at Celtic Park, so everything then is on the up. So the night before Glasgow Green Festival, I know you were at Reading that year on the Sunday. So the Glasgow Green Festival on the Saturday night. On the Friday night, I think Paul Weller, Super Furry Animals. I think I saw Paul Weller, the Super Furry Animals, and Beck. That was the 3 bands I saw on the Friday night. The Saturday night, it shows you where these two bands were. Oasis were headlining, Primal Scream were second.
Yep.
So you're talking about a Primal Scream with Manny on bass and Kevin Shields now on guitar. The best live band I've ever seen for a 5-year period where it was that version of the Primal Scream. Andrew Innes admitted it himself. He went, that version of the Scream was utterly awesome. They blew Oasis off stage that night. Absolutely.
They did it Reading as well. They did it Reading as well.
Stage that night.
Yep.
I mean, what would you rather listen to? Like Kowalski or Who Feels Love?
Little James.
You know what I mean, Or Little
Well,
James.
that was a bad example because Who Feels Love's a good song, but I get what you mean. Listen, right, I always remember Manny and Gillespie on stage had a great dynamic, right? Because obviously they were both like off their head at that point, Kev. They were still living it like rock stars, weren't they? And can you remember who Uri Geller supported? Which football team Uri Geller supported?
Is it Reading?
Yeah, it was Reading. So I'm at the Reading Festival and Manny dedicates one of the songs, it might have been Kowalski, to Uri Geller. And you can see Gillespie going like completely puzzled by this, right? And then Manny goes over and then they start laughing on stage as the song's already kicking in. It was, I would say, probably the best festival I've ever been to, Reading, at that time. Even though, and I've said this before, I did miss the 6-2 game as a result of it. A couple of my mates actually who were I sat next to at the time, season tickets at that point, were at McGee as well. So these events are great for bringing people together, Kev. Some of whom you don't otherwise see that often. So we've already ranked the albums 1 to 4, and we both agree that this is the worst so far in the Oasis discography. I'm going to ask you now, though, to drop 2 album tracks and replace them with 2 B-sides from that time, Kev.
I've actually dropped 5. I've dropped 5. My track listing.
That means you've dropped Who Feels Love, eh?
Aye, of course. I've kept Bushes just because it's a decent intro. Go Let It Out, then We Make Believe, Cigarettes in Hell, One Way Road, Gas Panic, Where Did It All Go Wrong, Sunday Morning Call, Carry Us All, then it ends with Full On.
And you think that's a better album?
I think that's a far better album. There's still dodgy areas in it. It was like Full On is probably not a strong ending, but it's a far better ending than the weak-willed Roll It Over, which did end the album.
It did, and I asked you for 2. You gave me 5, Kev. That's fine. Rules are there to break them. Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is, and Little James will be consigned into a bin, never ever to be listened to again. And if I lived to 100, I would gladly never listen to both those songs ever again. Let's All Make Believe is a certainty to replace Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is, and then One Way Road, I think, is a wee gem. It's a wee gemier song, and I'd put that in instead of Little James, which is just horrendous. Even as a nursery rhyme, I wouldn't sing it to my wee boy as he was going to bed at night. Terrible song.
Every instrument that played on Little James and like Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is, they should get put in a big wicker man and set on fire and shit. And just ritualise that these songs will never be heard again.
We could have a festival like that, Kev. We could maybe arrange that, and we could ask people to bring their copies of this album, and we could stick that into the wicker man as well before we set it on fire. Right, what's the best lyric?
The whole of Sunday Morning Call. I just love that song. I think it maybe.
Does it resonate with you? Does it resonate with you?
Oh,
has there been a point in your life where you're thinking the lyrics speak to you? Yeah.
Aye, definitely. Every Sunday morning after a heavy Saturday night.
For how long? A decade?
For 2 decades, maybe.
Oh, dearie me. I like this lyric from Where Did It All Go Wrong? Do you keep the receipts for all the friends that you buy? Because there's a few people I know in my life who that I could relate that to. Right, you've got a quid. You get 3 songs on the Screamacelica jukebox. Pick your 3 songs.
Oh, Go Let It Out, Sunday Morning Call, then Go Let It Out again.
Well, I'm going to go for Who Feels Love, Kev, right? Sunday Morning Call and Where Did It All Go Wrong? And, you know, as you say, that sums up this album for Oasis. It was never going to be the same again after this album. Yeah, there were some moments between now and them chucking it, and we will cover them in future editions of Screamacelica. When Kevin and I are both available on a Wednesday at 7, we'll do this show. We've had K by Cooler Shaker requested. We've had Going for Gold by Shed 7 requested. And by the way, why not request albums that aren't, you know, from the 90s? We could, I mean, my musical taste goes back to the 60s.
We'll have a look at the period when these albums come out. I mean, I'm going to be quite obvious now. New on in, every Oasis B-side I hear is going to be brand new, because I never listened to any of the B-sides.
There's some really good remixes, mate, that you're going to enjoy.
So I'm actually looking forward to bringing myself up to date. Like, wonder. I mean, they 5 today were 4 and full on. They were great surprises to me, and I was going. I was like, how did they not end up on that album?
I know.
I was like flabbergasted.
And also, this is the year that Richard Ashcroft went solo, Kev. Alone with Everybody, or
Yes.
Alone with Everyone was released. Decent album, we might cover it. Right, we're going to get on to what comes next then. What comes after this? Heathen Chemistry.
Heathen Chemistry.
Do we go back at some point and do the master plan? Do we throw that in at some stage? Or is it albums only? Because that's obviously a compilation.
Oh, we need to discuss that. I count the master plan as an album.
Right, we'll cover it then, Kev. We'll cover it.
I do count it as an album.
Right, everybody that's enjoyed this, get onto YouTube or Spotify or Amazon Prime, whatever you use, and type in Who Feels Love. Give it a wee listen. Revisit it. It's a fantastic song. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And thank you once again, Kevin, for the return of Screamacelica. Thanks for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you very much.